had a chance to fix something that's thoroughly messed up, and they didn't. I honestly, I don't know. I wouldn't say that they blew it. I really don't think that's the case. We'll see what the ramifications are of this really about a year and a half from now, because it'll be really hard to determine until we see the midterm elections. All right, like I said, like I told you in the past when we talked about elections, Democrats will probably pick up seats in the House anyways, because that's just historically accurate. The party that is not in the White House generally picks up seats in Congress. So, I don't know. Maybe they pick up 2 or 3 and it really becomes a sort of unimportant event. Remains to be seen. Alright. So we ended Friday talking about various types of jurisdiction. Yes? We remember this? Vaguely, briefly, not at all. See my little board up there? Alright, we have the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can have original or appellate jurisdiction. The appellate court, shockingly, only have appellate jurisdiction. And our district courts have original jurisdiction. Alright? For the most part, everything that we talk about in this unit is going to be Supreme Court related, right? Or federal court related. We won't go into a lot of detail on the state courts, because the test doesn't really go into much detail on state courts, because every state court system is set up slightly differently. Alright? So, these are sort of the requirements in order to make a quote-unquote federal case out of it. Alright? So, easiest understanding is if it involves the Constitution, a federal law, or a treaty. Right? Those make it a federal issue. Alright? Admiralty or maritime law. Okay, so anything happening at sea is federal. Disputes between 2 or more states, obviously you can't put those in state courts because the state might be biased. If you're actually suing the United States government, it goes to a federal court. If you have citizens from different states that are suing one another, that goes to the federal court. Anything involving ambassadors or diplomats or anything in which an actual state is a party. Right? Make sense? Alright. So, understand that we do have 2 systems of courts. And we have the state court, we have the national court. They look pretty much the same. Like I said a second ago, we will primarily talk about the federal court or the national court. But basically, states have their own state Supreme Court, just as the national Supreme Court has its own Supreme Court. States have the equivalent of a district court and the equivalent of a court of appeals. Alright? So, as far as that goes, it's very similar. Now, when we look at our federal courts, there are different types of federal courts. Alright? And just so you understand, the Constitution, Article 3 of the Constitution deals with the Supreme Court, right? We know this? Please just nod your head yes and lie to me and tell me that you know this. Okay? We went in a specific order for a specific reason, right? Congress first, because that's Article 1, right? President second, because that's Article 2. Supreme Court third, that's Article 3. What's up?
Isn't it true like the first 5 articles of the Constitution can't be changed or amended?
No. Not true.
I thought I heard that.
The first article of the Constitution says that senators are appointed by state legislatures.
Oh, okay.
That's actually a part of Article 1. That's been amended.
Oh, okay.
And so there's nothing to say that it can't. Alright? Now, so understand that Article 3 covers the Supreme Court. Alright? But I need you to understand that that means that this is the only thing covered in Article 3. Alright? These are actually part of Article 1. under the jurisdiction of the Congress. Congress can create as many as it wants, or as few as it wants. Okay? Congress gets to carry out this aspect of law. Right? Again, part of what makes Congress so important. Alright? So we have basically our legislative or our special courts. Okay? They're outlined in Article 1. Alright? Again, created as part of the powers of Congress. With these types of courts, judges hold fixed terms of office. Okay? They do not exist, or they are not there for life. Alright? There are different types of these courts that we won't go into in too much detail. Alright? Because, again, they don't care about, like, the Court of Veterans Appeals. Like, oh well, you're not going to get questioned. Alright? So, Article 3 deals with the Supreme Court itself. Again, Congress has the authority to create lower courts. Ultimately, what we get here are the district court system and then the appellate court system. At the Supreme Court level, judges are appointed for life. This is covered in Federalist number 78, and you should probably look that up. All right, anybody want to venture a guess as to why Supreme Court justices should have lifetime appointments?
They have politics.
That's the primary concern, right, or one of the primary concerns, is that they should stay out of politics. All right, you don't want a court that is swinging as America does politically, right? And that shouldn't strike you as being odd, because think about, in fact, I did this, of our last, and I want to say I did this pre-Trump, so let's not count Trump. Of our last 10 presidents, how many Republicans do we have? Take a wild guess.
3 or 4.
Nope.
5.
5. How many Democrats do we have?
5.
5. Relatively equal, yes? Okay? So we swing back and forth. I mean, look, we have Trump right now. Before Trump, we had Obama, Democrat. Before Obama, we had Bush, Republican. Before Bush, we had Clinton, Democrat. Before Clinton, we had Bush, Republican. Reagan, Republican. Before Reagan, we had Carter, Democrat. Right? Before Carter, it was Ford. And I want to say I didn't count Ford, because Ford was appointed. And Nixon, Republicans. Prior to that, we had LBJ and JFK. Right? So we have seen a significant swing or shift in terms of Republican versus Democrat and back and forth. Right? We would not want to have, say, 5-year appointments to the Supreme Court, because then a president, right, and think about it, if you were doing it every 5 years, you'd be appointing 2 a year, basically. Right? That means that a president would essentially, in 4 years, appoint more than half the Supreme Court in one term. Right? That would cause drastic swings to the court when, in times where Republicans were in office, you'd see a massively conservative court. During the times of Democrats being in office, you'd see a significantly liberal court. Right? And then that court would try to overturn itself regularly, and that just doesn't lend itself well to the entire process. Alright. Petty jury decides the outcome of a case, so it's a trial jury. That actually does happen or can happen at a district level as well. So you can actually have trial by jury in federal cases, just like you can have trial by jury in state cases. Alright. That is, or happens during original jurisdiction in our district courts. They can be civil, criminal, or constitutional cases. Right? Although a lot of the times, or some, not a lot of the times, some of the times constitutional cases will go directly to the Supreme Court. Alright? Any cases within our district court down here can be challenged to the Court of Appeals. Right? But as I told you the other day, the district court hears facts. Right? These are the facts of the case. The appellate court will hear issues of law. Right? So, if you present your case and you are found guilty of murder, You cannot appeal because you don't like the decision. Doesn't work that way. The only way you can appeal is if you have some sort of legal grounds for appealing. Alright? Now, of our appellate courts, there are, actually that's a typo, there are 13 of them. The one in DC was not one, it's actually 2. Alright? And it's split up based on what the Court of Appeals is actually hearing in DC. Alright? The appellate courts have multiple judges, anywhere from, I want to say the smallest appellate court has 6, and then what is it, the Ninth Circuit Court, or Ninth Appellate Court, is the largest, and it has 24 justices, maybe? Something like that. Alright, with appeals courts, they're tried in front of a panel of 3 judges, except when you have this en banc right here, which is simply a French term that means like en bench, and then every justice there will hear it. Alright, doesn't typically happen because there are a number of these courts that have an even number of judges, and that's, you don't want that. You don't want a 3-3 tie. Alright. So they'll give it to a panel of 3 justices. Those judges will hear the case, they'll rule, and then again, if need be, you can appeal that to the Supreme Court.
So like, what decide, like, how do you decide like which circuit court you go to? Like, if you're in a case, like, are they for like certain like?
It's based on the region where the district court was. Okay? The better question really is if there's a district court that has 15 judges, right? Obviously, some appointed by Republicans, some appointed by Democrats. How do they decide the 3 that you get in your case?
Whoever holds the majority?
What?
Whoever holds the majority?
What do you mean?
Like whichever, like they would vote on it and whoever has.
Randomly assigned.
Oh really?
Yeah. Just sort of happens that way. I mean, that's the way our legal system works, period. So when you look at a state level and a district court, there are all kinds of judges there that will oversee, you know, what you think of as your typical criminal court, right? And it just so happens that as they're passing out cases, Judge A gets this case, Judge B gets this case, Judge C gets this case, right? And who you go to is completely random. Alright? Alright, so federal judges, attorneys, all this stuff. So this is the actual sort of interworkings of our judicial branch, which really covers the Department of Justice in a little bit more depth and detail than what will cover most other bureaucracies, right? So we won't go into a ton of detail on bureaucracy as we get to the end of this week or the beginning of next week, but the DOJ, or the Department of Justice, that is one of the agencies that will cover in a significant amount of detail, because you really need to understand the inner workings of the DOJ in order to understand really our legal system or our judicial branch. Because obviously the Justice Department works with or in conjunction with the Supreme Court, right? So the first thing that we have here is we have the Attorney General. Our current Attorney General is Jeff Sessions, right? Our Attorney General is appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. And this is the individual who oversees the Justice Department as a whole. Okay? And again, this is that sort of cabinet level position that we have talked about before that has competing loyalties, right? So Sessions has some loyalty to Trump because Trump put him in his position. He has some loyalty to the Senate because the Senate is the one who confirmed him. He has some loyalty to Congress more generally because they're the one that provides him with his budget. But he has a significant amount of loyalty to his department itself. All right? And in fact, the Attorney General will be the one who has a significant role in appointing a number of people to positions within the Department of Justice. All right? Next, you have the Solicitor General. All right? The Solicitor General, again, presidential appointee with Senate confirmation. The Solicitor General isn't really second in command. In fact, as far as the hierarchical structure goes, the Solicitor General almost sort of functions outside of that hierarchy. This person's sole responsibility or job in life is to represent the United States government in cases in front of the Supreme Court. And they are the ones ultimately that are responsible for sort of taking the government's position then in those cases. All right? Additionally, he's the person that will determine if the government is on the losing side at the appellate level as to whether or not the government would like to appeal said decision. All right? So the Solicitor General is truly a position that an actual attorney is in. I'm going to assume, and you know me, I hate making assumptions, but I'm going to assume Jeff Sessions has a law degree because he's a member of Congress, and most congressmen have law degrees, but also because he was up for a judicial appointment many years ago, right, a couple of decades ago. So I'm going to assume that at that point in time he would have been qualified, and he probably does have a law degree. All right. Now, the Solicitor General, though, unlike Jeff Sessions will not actually be practicing law as the Attorney General. The Solicitor General actually practices law, and practices law for or on behalf of the United States government at a national or federal level. And we then have U.S. attorneys, all right? And this, good timing. You should have learned about U.S. attorneys about a week and a half ago, because we know that terrible controversy of Donald Trump firing like 48 attorneys. Do we hear about that controversy?
Well, that's what all the presidents always do.
Exactly. Right? Not controversial at all.
They just
Right.
changed the headline from Obama
Sure.
did whatever and then Trump fired them.
Well, technically he asked for their resignation. He didn't even fire them.
Yeah.
He fired the ones that refused to tender their resignation. Right? I'll be 100% honest with you. Dr. Black came in here today and was like, hey, we don't really want you to be a teacher here anymore. I'm not going to sit there and be like, no, you know what, I'm going to stay. I love it. I would love to continue working for somebody that I know dislikes me and dislikes my philosophies and practices. I don't understand why you would want to work for somebody that was ideologically opposed to you in that regard. So, it is what it is. The one guy that made the biggest stink about it, part of his issue was probably the fact that he claims that Trump met with him and asked him to stay on.
He's probably going to run for something.
At this point, I would assume he probably will too, right? So for the U.S. attorneys, there's at least one attorney for every district court, right? There has to be. At the district court level, the U.S. attorney is ultimately the one that is responsible for prosecuting federal cases at a district level. So like the Solicitor General, the district attorney has that same sort of function or ideology or understanding. All right? This is the person who actually will stand up in front of judges and deliver whatever the case is on behalf of the United States government. All right? They are supposed to do this without prejudice. You know what that means?
Racial bias.
Any sort of bias. Not just racially, but really any sort of bias. Alright, so a U.S. attorney is supposed to, and it's really hard to do. I'm not going to say that they don't do it. In fact, I think for the most part, the majority of them actually do a pretty good job of it. But it's really hard to present a case and be 100% impartial or 100% unbiased. Because obviously we all have our own opinions about things. Right? But the expectation is that they enforce the law as the law is written. Alright? So that's sort of the key there. Again, although we're talking about the federal level, a lot of this coincides to what you see at the state. Right? At the state, you have district attorneys as well. So wherever the state courts are, you have DAs. They're the ones that prosecute on behalf of the state, right? So if you, oh shoot, if you get a speeding ticket, right, you might need an assistant DA someday if you want to challenge your speeding ticket, right? Because obviously you're challenging the law either against the officer who ticketed you or the law itself. And some assistant district attorney would ultimately be the one that tried the case for the government, right? Like most local cases, at a national or federal level, you tend to see a significant number of cases settled via plea bargain, right? We know what a plea bargain is?
Yep. Yes.
Some of us are nodding our head yes. Colson, what is it? What? Are you too busy playing video games on your cell phone? You are? Okay. So you don't know what a plea, maybe you need to learn what a plea bargain is then. You might have to take one someday. Ken, what's a plea bargain? You don't know? Nick, use the restroom, go ahead.
You said admit to a lower offense.
What?
You admit to a lower offense.
You basically strike a deal. You're willing to plead guilty to some lower offense in order to avoid prosecution, right? Basic concept. Okay, so you will see in district attorneys, they do this all the time. Okay, they will routinely offer deals in order to try to lessen charges, in order to expedite sort of the legal process. Okay, be honest with you. If you ever get a speeding ticket, right? How many of you have gotten a ticket at this point in your life already? Okay, how many of you just, when you got your ticket, you just mailed in your fine and called it a day?
Is defensive driving a plea bargain? Like if you, it's like they offered that you could do it, right? You could like take a course or whatever, like pay less or I'm not sure all the intricate workings of that. But let's say you got a speeding ticket and that's an option. What is that considered?
Well, it depends. Are they saying that you no longer, like they're gonna say that you didn't speed if you take the class? Then yes, that would constitute a plea bargain.
Okay.
Okay, it would be some sort of agreement in order to lessen your charge. Okay, I'll be 100% honest with you. If you do get a speeding ticket, you're better off just showing up on the day that you're supposed to go to court. Okay, rather than mailing in your ticket, because think about the number of tickets that cops give these days, right? Because we had this whole conversation about police officers now being sources of revenue, yes? Do we remember that conversation? No, you're looking at me confused. Were you not here that
No,
night?
I was here. I'm ready to get out of this ticket. I got caught in a speed trap, so I'm interested now. I'm about to go to sleep, so.
It's about to go to sleep, but now that you're talking about my personal life.
Yeah, now I'm ready. This little town needed some money for their courthouse, so they.
I'm sure that's part of what it is. But here's the thing. And this is part of like the sort of racket of tickets for profit and is generating or as a source of revenue, right? If you actually show up, a lot of the times they'll drop the charges. I've seen people that got caught, going 10 over the limit, and they'll just be like, hey, pay the court costs. And we'll give you a fix-it ticket that doesn't even go on your driving record, and you're done, right? Which, believe me, if you're ever given that option, you want to take it because that means that there's no speeding ticket reported to your insurance company, which means that your car insurance, your driver's insurance doesn't go up. All right? But it's also a way for them to expedite the process. The DA can make. Literally, the last ticket I got when I was in college, and showed up that morning, and there was a line like down the block of the courthouse there in Chapel Hill. All right, and they had like 3 assistant DAs that basically you brought them your paperwork, and they were like, "Oh, here, we'll do this for you instead." And they just wrote on there, and if you accepted it, you agreed to it, you went to a different line, you paid your fine, and you left. right? To where the last speeding ticket I ever got, I got caught. I want to say I got caught going like 13 over the limit. And the cop was really nice to me, and he wrote me a ticket for like 5 over the limit. Because I think he was a former Marine as well. And so the DA was kind of shocked that the cop was that nice to me to begin with. And so they literally just knocked it down to court costs only, right? Anybody want to guess how much court costs are? They're 3 figures, depending on where you're at, right? So in North Carolina, the court costs were, if I remember correctly, like $104 then. But that's also almost a decade ago. I would assume they've gone up since that point in time, right? But, and again, what do the court costs actually go to?
Government,
What?
the money goes to the government.
Well, but why do they charge you court costs? What's the purpose of that?
They're like pay some salaries.
So that they can make money. That's it. That's it. It's just so that they can make money. All right. Okay. Your U.S. attorneys, again, they're appointed by the president. Assistant U.S. attorneys, though, are not. Okay. They're basically. I'm sure Jeff Sessions somewhere has a list of possible or potential assistant U.S. attorneys. And when a position opens up, he'll go through the list and be like, okay, there's a district court in Houston that has an opening. You're a Houston attorney. Would you be interested in this job? Right? And then that's it. All right. Federal judges are appointed by the Senate. Appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate. That's why we have a Senate Judiciary Committee that is a standing committee. Okay, we remember that term, standing committee? Vaguely? No? Maybe? Not at all. Standing committee is a committee that exists permanently at all times. Senate Judiciary Committee is a standing committee because you routinely have some sort of opening somewhere at some level of the Justice Department. Right? We also have all of those U.S. attorneys and everybody else that falls under the Justice Department. All right? So, our federal judges, they're appointed for life. They can be impeached. Doesn't happen very often. In fact, there's only been a handful of removals in well over 200 years of U.S. history. All right? We do not impeach judges. All right? Compensation, like everything, is determined by Congress because Congress is the one that controls it. Compensation cannot be lowered during a judge's term of office, which should make sense to you. All right? Congress should not be able to penalize a judge because they issue a ruling that Congress deems to be wrong or incorrect or unpopular or whatever. All right? These are the salaries from 2000. They're out of date now. Whoops. Court of Appeals, I want to say a Court of Appeals member makes $215,000 a year now, right? I'll tell you right now, guys, if you can get like a good job in government, it's nice. Right? Good job in government is nice. There are some pretty high salaries that accompany those things. All right, some of the factors that are utilized when determining or when selecting judges. We've talked about this idea of senatorial courtesy already, right? So when there's an opening from that individual state, there's been a long-standing tradition of a president at least consulting with the senators prior to making their appointment. Again, doesn't mean that the 2 senators from that state actually get to have some sort of input in the decision, nor does it mean they can sort of veto said decision. It's just a courtesy. All right? Then the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're the ones who actually screen nominees. You would have witnessed this last week with Neil Gorsuch. He went through, I want to say a whole week. I want to say they were still holding hearings on him Friday of last week.
We had through Wednesday hearings, and then Thursday was like they had people from like both sides, like
Thursday were the witnesses that were against him, but wasn't he still in front of the committee on Friday, or no?
I don't think so.
He might not have been, I don't remember. I mean, even though he himself is not answering questions on that Thursday, that's still a part of his hearing process, right? That's when they call witnesses both for and against him, and what he did as a judge, right? If you had paid attention to it at all, you would have noticed Republicans, sort of issuing him some softball-based questions. I mean, some of them were absolutely comical. I forget one of them, a senator let his teenager texted him and asked him the question, and Gorsuch couldn't answer, but it's some like what would you rather?
I think those are comical than like the Democrat questions are just.
Well, the Democrat questions weren't comical, and they weren't meant to be comical. They weren't meant to be lighthearted. They were meant to try to force him into a corner to say something that they could use on the Senate floor to be like, this is why he's not qualified.
But like-
This is why we can't confirm him.
But some of their things are just like outlandish.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say outlandish. It was very partisan. That's an accurate statement. But you would expect Republicans and Democrats to be partisan when it comes to a hearing of that nature, right? I mean, a lot of what they did is they cherry-picked individual cases that he presided over, and then, tried to paint him as being a bad guy or a judge that was ruling in favor of corporations versus people, because that's one of the sort of things that Democrats are real big on right now in terms of what they argue, right? And the truth of the matter is, everything that he's ever done is all fair game, right? I mean, apparently when he was, I guess he taught at some point in time, but he asked one of his classes if they knew of any women who got a job and then used their job so that they could get maternity leave, and as soon as the baby was born and the maternity leave was up, they quit. Right? Are there women in America that have done that? I'm sure there are. Oh well. Right? I mean, here's the thing: is if you offer free daycare at the company, and the kid was literally like on the ground floor of your office building, I'm sure more women would be willing to work. Right? I mean, that's the type of incentive that you should, as a company, that you should consider offering in order to attract the best and brightest employees. Right? If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. But the very fact that somebody makes a comment like that is fair game in one of these investigations, right? And investigation is probably the wrong word. I mean, that's what the Democrats try to turn it into, or the party not in power. Again, I don't want to sit here and pretend like this is the Democrats that are just out to like ruin everything. Republicans do this when they're the minority party in order to try to stop appointments from people that they disagree with. All right. Again, none of that should come as a shock. All right. But once all of these hearings occur, the Judiciary Committee will then send a recommendation to the Senate floor, and then that will either be approved or rejected. Okay. How many votes does it take to approve an appointment?
60.
Incorrect.
50.
51.
60 break the.
60 breaks the filibuster. Okay.
You're never going to be able to.
What is the nuclear option?
Well, the nuclear option simply means you get rid of a filibuster.
Yeah.
That's what the nuclear option. It only takes a simple majority to confirm the actual justice. Okay. Here's the difference, and this is one of the differences between the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay. That in the Senate basically, because it has different rules, because it's more informal, for anything to get done on the Senate floor, you have to have what's called the rule of unanimous consent, which means all 100 senators have to agree to it. Do they ever all agree to anything? No. They simply just like, I'm not going to fight this. I don't care. Okay? But what they do is if they're going to fight it, right, what they can actually do is they can threaten to filibuster. All right? And then if that happens, they're actually filibustering whether or not it even gets on the docket to be a part of the debate. Because if it gets onto the docket and it's a part of the debate, there are rules in the Senate that would allow Mitch McConnell to step up, and because he's the Senate Majority Leader, he has first opportunity to speak whenever he wants. Anytime anything is addressed, if he wants to talk first, he gets to talk first. Okay? And he can actually step up at that point and introduce some amendments and some changes to sort of the procedural aspects of the Senate that would essentially block a filibuster, because they could cap, at that point he could cap the debate to like 100 hours. Right? And then you have to vote regardless, and once that's done, and I forget the name of that rule, no individual senator can speak for more than an hour, I think. Right? Which is why it's capped at 100 hours. Never really gets there. Alright? I'll be honest with you, as the rules have changed, and I know some people that are smarter than I am, that are actual like congressional scholars, like PhDs in political science, that believe we're probably only a decade or maybe a little bit more away from the Senate getting rid of filibuster altogether. Right? Because they can modify their rules as they see fit. So, one of the things that we've seen in recent years, obviously, is we have seen a number of political appointees take longer and longer in terms of confirmation. There are some judges, or just not to the Supreme Court, but to lower courts, that have had their appointment held up for years, literally years. Which on some level is a terrible thing, because that means that the judges that are on those courts, they're having to do extra work because there's an open seat there. And again, when you have that sort of panel of three, well, if there's supposed to be 20 judges at that court and there's only 17, now you've still got your rule of three, that's fine, but they're all taking on more workload, or a heavier workload, than what they should if it was fully staffed. All right, and again, Republicans and Democrats alike do this. All right, the majority vote is needed for confirmation. There have been a significant number of times, though, in which a filibuster has either blocked a vote from occurring, or you've actually had appointees that were simply shot down, or in the case of Merrick Garland, didn't even get a hearing, right? So there was no vote ever taken on him. There was no action ever taken in that regard. All right. Typically, judges do belong to the political party of the president who appoints them. All right. Probably not shocking to you. They're predominantly whites. Okay. That shouldn't be so shocking at all. We do have some informal sort of standards on the court, like we have the black seat, right? So this is like a comical teen movie where, you know, there's always the one token black friend in the movie, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, we basically have that understanding on the Supreme Court. Truthfully, I don't think it matters. I mean, let's say even when the Republicans are in power, if Clarence Thomas dies or resigns, they would appoint another black person, right? And in all likelihood, if it was Republicans, it'd probably be a black man, because I don't know that Republicans would double up on a minority there and go black more. All right.
The black man there right now, he's a Republican, right?
Clarence Thomas, yes. Thomas was appointed by Reagan, I believe. He was appointed in the 80s. So it would have either been Reagan, or if he was late 80s, and I don't think he was, I think he was mid 80s. But if it was late 80s, he would have been appointed by Bush. I think he's actually the longest tenured justice on the court right now. I think he's been on the court longer than anybody else, and yet he's not the oldest member of the court. He was like 43 when he was appointed, which is incredible. Like, that's young. All right, that's actually really young. Okay, people are sitting there talking about one of the problems, like Democrats are saying one of the problems with Gorsuch is he's too young. He's like 48, right? By no means would he be the youngest Supreme Court justice ever. Not even close, all right? So again, we talk about this, they're mostly male. We have seen an increase, specifically with Democratic presidents. They've tended to be a little bit more open to minorities and to women. With the Supreme Court, we established the woman's seat with Sandra Day O'Connor. There are currently 3 women on the court now. So RBG, which is how I always refer to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's one of them. Is it Hagan or Kagan? I can never remember. With an H or K? Zane?
K, I think.
I think it might be K.
Sotomayor.
And then Sonia Sotomayor are the other 2. Right? So we have 3 women on the court now. Honestly, RBG is on her way out. She's one of the older justices. There was actually speculation that if Clinton had won, she would have retired. She would have resigned. She's probably going to do everything in her power now to hold on for the next 4 years and hope that Trump's voted out in 2020. Because in reality, she's the one that violated the, what's the name of that rule? The one that Kellyanne Conway got in trouble for, right? No, not the one that Conway got in trouble for something else. The one that they tried to get Comey on, right? And I forget the name of the rule. It was in one of the earlier PowerPoints, but it's about a federal employee getting political. They're not supposed to.
Like the Hatch.
Yeah, Hatch Act, right? That's it. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually came out and was very verbally, sort of almost abusive to Donald Trump during the campaign trail. She backed off on that and actually apologized, but probably something that at the very least she should have been counseled on. Judges do have a lifetime appointment, so age becomes a considerable factor, right? You don't want to be appointing justices to the Supreme Court that are in their 70s, because theoretically you want a justice to outlive the president that appoints them, right? Look, for instance, at Clarence Thomas. Thomas has been on the court for nearly 30 years now, right? Or maybe, actually it might be more than 30 years now, right? And so that affords Ronald Reagan, who I'm assuming it was Reagan that appointed him, right? Reagan has now been able to help shape the future of America through his Supreme Court appointment for long after he's actually died. Not only just not been president of the United States, right? But Reagan's been dead now for,
2001, right?
I want to say it was when I was in the Marine Corps, right? Because I want to say I remember flying the flag at half mast for like, it was like 10 days, I think, for Reagan's death, all right? But the age becomes important. Roughly 50 is generally about what you're looking at, right? And that affords them that 25, 30-year window. Now that doesn't mean that they won't stay longer. There's actually a former justice that resigned who's still alive today, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But you don't always see that. A lot of the times they will, they'll work right up until their death, like Scalia did. All right. Especially so long as they don't have some sort of mental defect, right? I mean, if Alzheimer's begins to set in or something like that, they can be removed at that point. All right. As far as their ideologies go, obviously presidents want people that are ideologically similar. All right. You don't want to appoint somebody that's going to turn around and rule against some of the things that you want. I would imagine that before Trump nominated Gorsuch, he probably got his opinion on a variety of concepts. Okay. Now I believe Gorsuch wholeheartedly when he says that, Trump didn't tell him how he wanted him to vote on anything, or didn't say, hey, I'm going to appoint you, let's go overturn Roe v. Wade. But I think Trump wouldn't be doing his job correctly if he didn't at least ask what Gorsuch's opinions were about a variety of topics. All right. That being said, sometimes it's really difficult to determine how people are going to respond or how people are going to rule, especially down the line, right? So future behavior is a difficult thing to predict, not always something that we're real capable of getting, all right? There are also the idea that new issues can arise, which, again, new technologies, things like that have never been a part of the idea before, so that makes it difficult, all right? Believe it or not, you do have a significant number of judges that quote-unquote stray. These are people that were appointed by one party and then they ultimately end up making rulings that seemingly violate that party's ideology. Realize, though, that depending on what it is that you're looking at for the cases, some cases can seemingly go one way or the other. So if you look at, like right to die legislation or physician-assisted suicide, and you might have a very conservative Republican judge that says, okay, go ahead, right? That's fine, right? Now, that's not a conservative ideology. But maybe that justice was looking at it as saying, look, states' rights, if that state wants to allow it, whatever, right? That is a very conservative ideology, right? So it depends on how you're sort of measuring that aspect as well, all right? And then again, this is the idea that I just talked about here with RBG and her not retiring. And the American Bar Association will nominate, or excuse me, not nominate, they'll evaluate nominees. Doesn't mean a whole lot, all right? And then anything that exists is fair game, right? So like I said, if Gorsuch is making comments about women trying to manipulate the system in order to get maternity leave and free money and then quit their job, that's fair game in terms of the hearings and everything else, right? The number of judges, Congress can increase or decrease the number of courts and the number of judges underneath the Supreme Court, right? How many justices always have to be on the Supreme Court? Wrong. How many justices always have to be on the Supreme Court? There's no number, right? 9 is just simply a tradition that we've held to for a long time now, all right? So it doesn't really happen. We'll go ahead and stop there. I know that was a little heavy today. I probably should have warned you in the first place. It was going to be. Tomorrow